for joining us today. I'm Kathy Dixon with the Virginia Farm Bureau, and we're bringing you the Real Virginia Virtual Farm Tour live from the State Fair of Virginia. The fair is where lots of people go every year to learn about agriculture and to have fun while doing it. Because we believe everyone should have the opportunity to visit a local Virginia farm, we have decided to bring the farm to you. Here at the fair, you can see calves being born, pet an alpaca, and even watch busy bees making honey. We know you want to visit farms, but it isn't always possible. That's why we are bringing farms to you, virtually. Today we will highlight 6 different family farms. All you have to do is sit back, relax, and watch our program. Joining us now at the Agriculture Pavilion is Sherri McKinney, host of the virtual tour, to explain how all of this works.
Thanks, Kathy. We are so glad that we are here at the State Fair of Virginia. And folks, right from your computer, right at home, you'll be able to tour a cattle farm, a pork farm, and a poultry operation, and a vegetable operation, and even a dairy. And some of these farmers will actually be with us and join us live here on our panel, along with several other agricultural experts, as well to answer questions that you may have. Now, folks, it's real simple to send us your questions. All you have to do is tweet your questions to @VA Farm Bureau. Make sure you use a hashtag RealVA, or post them to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/VA Farm Bureau. Joining us today here at the State Fair for this interactive discussion is Margaret Ann Smith, who is a Rockingham County beef cattle farmer whose farm is featured on one of our virtual farm tours. David Hickman, a potato and grain farmer from the Eastern Shore, whose farm is also captured through our virtual tour. Additionally, we have Spencer Neal. He is a Virginia Farm Bureau commodity specialist, Jonah Bowles, an agricultural market analyst, and Jim Riddell, who is a former assistant director for the Agriculture and Natural Resources programs with Virginia Tech Cooperative Extension, and a farmer in Louisa County, and as well as also the current Louisa County Farm Bureau president. Thank you all so much for being with us here today. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's join over at the Yearling Barn here at the State Fair, where Secretariat was raised, is Kathy Dixon. She's going to introduce us to our first farm.
Thanks, Sherri. The first stop on our virtual tour is the farm where Margaret Ann Smith raises beef cattle with her family. Margaret Ann explains the multi-generational farm and the care that goes into taking care of their livestock. Many descendants of Virginia's early farmers continue to produce food and fiber on much of the same farmland across the state. These farms are designated as Virginia Century Farms in honor of that historic legacy. Mac and daughter Margaret Ann Smith are 5th and 6th generation farmers who raise beef cattle on the same rolling hills in Rockbridge County that their ancestors farmed 100 years ago.
There's 3 generations here on the farm at any given day, and they range from my grandparents that are 87 and 84, who are still very active, still feed cattle every day, are still very hands-on in management decisions, to my dad, my aunt, and my uncle, who all have their own individual operations within that. And then there's 4 of my generation here full-time. Myself, my brother, and 2 cousins are all here at the family farm. We all have our own different aspects within the farm, but everybody within the family is part of the operation.
For Mac Smith, it is an honor to know his family has worked this land and was able to hand it down generation after generation.
When you look around and you say, well, you know, great-granddad or great-great-great-granddad built this or done that or cleared this land and cut the timber off of it, you know, made a cropland out of it. There's just something there, and it's been passed on to me from my parents, and I've passed it on to my kids.
Mac Smith works every day along with his daughter and son Marcus at the farm. They work hard to protect the land and continue to grow their business with diversification. That has always been the key to keeping their farm profitable.
A lot of this land was in timber. It was cleared. There was poultry. There still is poultry. I have a brother who has a poultry operation. My granddad ranged turkeys on these hills. There was a country cured ham business at one time. We was in an egg business. We a lot of layers at one time. So this family has evolved as time changes. We just changed.
Protecting the land and water supply is another lesson also passed down to each new generation.
It's extremely important for us to be environmentally sound. This is my family's heritage. This is our asset. This is our livelihood. If we don't take care of it, it won't be here for the next generation.
The whole family agrees. Knowing that their farm is a Virginia Century farm is humbling.
Both of them are out of college. Both of them are back here farming full-time with us. God is proud. I mean, why could you not be proud?
It's very humbling to know that we're part of a multi-generational operation that has been able to be sustainable and be successful enough to keep passing it on. It's something to have a lot of pride in.
Reporting in Rockbridge County, I'm Kathy Dixon.
And that really is a beautiful farm you have, Margaret Ann. And this is how this is going to work today, folks. What we're going to do is we're going to take questions from the audience, from Twitter, from Facebook. Some questions were already emailed in to us. This is truly going to be an open discussion between the public and our farmers that raise all the wonderful food we eat here in Virginia. And Margaret Ann, our first question for you comes from Twitter. And the question is, do you all treat your beef with antibiotics? And if so, isn't that bad for consumers to eat that meat?
Well, Sherri, we use antibiotics when necessary in our livestock. As a producer, we're bestowed of taking care of the stewardship of our animals. Animals, just like humans, get sick. However, they can't raise their hoof and say, I don't feel good today, I need something, I need some Tylenol. They can't tell us that. So we watch and observe their eating habits, how they conduct themselves, and we treat when necessary by using a consulting veterinarian. The antibiotics we use today are extremely expensive. You know, a bottle of some of the vaccine antibiotics are as much as $1,600 and $1,700 a bottle. We use them sparingly and only when necessary by use of a consulting veterinarian. And that's our job. I mean, and as far as whether it's risky for humans, all antibiotics have cleared through multiple levels of FDA and USDA and all those things. There's federal withdrawal guidelines in place that we have to abide by in order for those animals to go to processing.
Now, another question that we hear quite often, Margaret Ann, is that people know that animals need food and water and shelter, but if cows are out in the field and they're not protected from the elements, say, you know, where do they go to find shelter? I know it seems like a funny question, but it's something that we all wonder from time to time.
Right. Livestock is made by Mother Nature to withstand the elements. They are built and designed. They have the right kind of body condition. Their hair is made for such to withstand the wind, to withstand some types of moisture. If you watch the livestock before we get a storm, the cattle will head to a different place on the farm where they know there's more protection. They may head to a tree line. They'll start eating more hay. They will consume. And as the stewards of them, we're responsible for providing them the necessary tools for them, whether it's dry hay or access to a barn or access to a tree line. And cattle are just neat to watch when a storm is coming. They know.
Right.
So.
And I think we've all seen that. They kind of start to head the opposite direction away from a storm, and it's really quite interesting to see when you're out on a farm. Now, another question we have is for Jonah, and my question for you, Jonah, is what actually affects beef prices? We've seen price of food rise dramatically over the last several years, but you know, especially with beef products, what affects that price for the consumer at the end?
Beef is just like any other agricultural commodity that goes through a discovery process to find a balance between supply and demand. We have been reducing the beef herds in the United States for decades, and so the number of animals that we've had has been in decline. However, more recently, the negative impact that high feed costs have had on our beef producers, as all the other segments of the livestock industry, has created the need in many cases for our livestock growers to reduce their herds, thereby increasing the supply of all meats to the market, and it's had a short-term lower impact on prices.
Thank you, Jonah. And again, these are all great questions, and I want folks to know, please feel free to write into Twitter and Facebook here to us and let us know your questions as well. And also, folks here in the audience, feel free to raise your hand if you have any additional questions. Don't feel like you're interrupting. Sure. Veronica will take a question for you. If you could please state your name and where
Glenn
you're
Holloway.
from.
I'm with Go Farm University out of Spotsylvania, Virginia. I want to address the gentleman, Jonah. On your last statement there, you were talking about the fact that beef numbers in America were the lowest they've been since 1950. With the drought, everybody has dumped prices or dumped beef onto the market. So indeed, it looks good right now. What are your predictions for the future as we go into the spring next year and beef herds are going to be lower than they have ever in history?
That's a great question.
For our livestock producers who are able to remain in business, they will enjoy high prices. question comes. How far down the road will that take? What will our supply of beef or any other meat supply actually go towards satisfying the demand of our consumers? We still have the ability to import, and quite often we will do that when prices become too high here and we find a less expensive supply offshore. However, I will still maintain that those producers who are able to maintain a consistency of production will benefit from higher prices, and it's probably not going to be more than 2 years down the road.
All right, thank you, Jonah. Now, it's time for us to continue our travels to Virginia farms, and this time we're going to visit a dairy in Hanover County. It's called Eastview Dairy, and it's like many dairies in Virginia, family-owned, where generations work side by side to keep the farm running day and night. Virginia dairy farmers are on the job 365 days a year to produce nearly 200 million gallons of milk. 98% of the state's dairies, like Eastview Farm in Hanover County, are family-run operations. This farm has been in the Nuckols family since the 1930s. A successful dairy farmer will work from before sunrise to well after sunset.
Begin getting up at 3 a.m., head on down here at 3 a.m. in the morning and gather the milking animals in from the pasture and bring them up to be milked, and milk till about 6:30, 7 o'clock. Later, after I go home for breakfast, come back and we'll take care of any odd chores that need to be taken care of, whether it's managing young stock or older stock. Go home to lunch, come back from lunch, 2:30 to 6 o'clock at night, finish up milking and head on home and have some good quality family time.
The work doesn't end after milking is over. Cows are moved out to graze in the pasture or into a freestall barn where they can move about how they wish before the next milking begins. They receive plenty of water and food to help in milk production during the day. There is a constant attention on the cows and their comfort to produce milk.
Often in our industry talk about and refer to cow comfort, which is something that we have really realized the benefits of making the cow comfortable and how much more productive she will be. So it benefits us both financially and ethically, because we really do love and care for our cows quite a bit.
One dairy cow will produce an average of 2,000 gallons of milk a year. The herd is monitored for any kind of problems, including illness. Cows that become sick are treated and separated from the herd.
We use an antibiotic on a cow just as you would for yourself or for your children to get them better if they're sick. If they have a high temperature. But there are different antibiotics for different infections, but it's as simple as if they have an infection and you give them the proper antibiotic, they will get better, and they actually are going to be more healthy cows.
They're not mass use. They're definitely used as a prevention mode for illness, just like you would treat yourself or your children. If you see a sick animal, you give it the proper antibiotics prescribed by your veterinarian, and no more or no less. Just follow the strict guidelines set forth.
The presence of antibiotic residues in milk is illegal. In fact, the milk is tested at the dairy following milking, then at the tanker and at the processing plant to see if it contains antibiotics. That's well before it's ever bottled and sold. If any trace is found, a tanker truck will be completely dumped, costing the dairy thousands of dollars. While dairy farming is tough, Taylor Nuckols says he hopes to be able to pass the farm on to his children to continue the family business and keep his land in agriculture.
At the very least, I want to be able to teach my children the value of a dollar and the value of hard work and what comes from hard work, at the very least. And hopefully at the most, they want to come back here and work on the farm and take it over and take it to newer, higher places than I can take it.
The Nuckols farm is one of 715 licensed commercial dairy farms in the state. Cash receipts generated statewide by these hardworking producers amounted to approximately $330 million, according to the latest statistics. And that is really a beautiful farm in Hanover County. I had a great time going out there and covering that story, but now we're going to move on with some of our questions. And this time, Spencer, this question is coming to you from our Facebook page, and it is, what about cows that are given a growth hormone? I know growth hormones have been a lot of controversy out there. Isn't that bad for people who drink the milk later?
Well, the primary one we're talking about here is RSBT, which is a naturally occurring hormone in dairy cattle that when provided them
It's live.
It's live. When provided above the naturally occurring levels, will allow them to produce more milk. Margaret's already touched on a little bit on the antibiotics and the hormone issue, and as a former beef cattle producer, those are two real hot button issues within the industry of meat or milk production. But with RSBT, it went through an arduous regulatory process, as all drugs or additives do. In the U.S., we've got the FDA, EPA, USDA. We've got all these oversight agencies that are going to ensure that what farmers are treating their animals with are safe for the human population. I think our consumers are fairly confident in those agencies to do those jobs. And again, all these are voluntary. RSBT, it's a voluntary supplement. Right. It's a tool in the toolbox that dairy farmers can choose to use or not to use.
And I think one of the interesting facts that I found out is that if there's any residual antibiotics or anything like that in a tank of milk, the whole tanker is flushed, correct?
That's correct. And in residues and meat products as well, antibiotic residues. So that's all part of the oversight process.
And that's about $11,000 to a farmer when you see a tanker get flushed. That's not good business, so no one's going to do that. No one's going to do that. Do we have any questions from our audience right now? Okay. Say your name first and where you're from.
My name's Nolan. I'm from Henrico. Do dairy farmers ever get to take a vacation?
That was one of the questions in our spin the wheel contest, and surprisingly some people said yes they do, but actually dairy farmers work 365 days a year, milking cows twice a day, so if they go on a vacation they have to find someone else to do that. And most farmers work pretty much year round, you would find. But that's a good question. A lot of people wouldn't realize.
And also there's another question that we got from online that said, on average, how many gallons of milk does a cow produce each day, roughly?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Do any of our panelists, we have former dairymen out there, roughly, how many gallons, roughly? 8 to 9 gallons. 8 to 9? 8 to 9 gallons a day. 8 to 9 gallons a day produced by one cow a day. And this is really interesting facts, and I think really we all can relate to milk. But now we're going to move from livestock to crops as we cross over the Chesapeake Bay to the Eastern Shore, where one farm family is making a difference in the foods we eat while also protecting their land.
Farming on the eastern shore of Virginia can be traced back to the early 1600s. Back then, tobacco was the primary crop. Eventually, the sandy loam soil proved to be best suited for vegetable and grain production. The eastern shore is the southernmost tip of the Delmarva Peninsula, known for some of the most productive farmland on the East Coast. The Hickman family has been growing potatoes, snap beans, corn, wheat, and soybeans on their eastern shore farm since the 1800s.
Started out with our great-great-grandfather, and he had 5 sons, and eventually the youngest one managed to get all of it.
This multi-generational family farm is one of the larger potato growers on the shore.
We produce about 300 tractor-trailer loads of potatoes a year. Our potatoes are all for fresh market, and they ship from Miami to Montreal, Canada, pretty much. We go into the northeastern markets for the first part of our season, and then when production south of us winds down, we begin going back into the southern states.
At one time, producers on the shore grew more than 30,000 acres of potatoes. Today, there are 4,500 acres of potatoes, and there are more than 5,000 acres of trellis tomatoes in production. Many producers on the shore are growing corn, wheat, and soybeans because of the growing poultry industry nearby.
From the vegetable standpoint, we have close proximity to the northeastern markets, so it gives us cheaper freight rates than, say, potatoes coming from Idaho to New York. We can deliver for half of the freight that they can. So I think the Eastern Shore has a good place in the future for agriculture.
Farmers here are very aware of the waterways that surround them. The Hickmans have been using best management practices on their farm for more than 40 years.
Being in this area, we've got to be conscious of being conservationally sound. We keep grass waterways to help slow the flow and reduce nutrients going into the bay. As you can see, we no-till all our grain. Our vegetable production requires tillage, but a lot of that we wait until directly before we plant to reduce any chance of runoff.
New equipment innovations have been developed over the years to reduce expenses and protect the environment. Large-scale farmers like the Hickmans use GPS to track the rows planted, and computerized planters will not overplant or over-fertilize crops. Cover crops like this vetch are planted to conserve water and provide natural mulch to prevent weeds.
We all grew up on the water. You know, we crabbed in the water, we went fishing, we were on the boat, swimming. You know, it's a thing that you want your kids to be able to do as well. Farmers are just as concerned about keeping the environment and the waters clean as anybody else.
But at the end of the day, it is being able to keep the farm and the family that matters the most.
It's definitely a lifestyle more than a job. It's, you know, like I said, it's something that you grow up with, and you really, when you think about it, you're not real sure what you would do if you did something else, you know, because this is just kind of what you're born to do and what you've done all your life, and it's just natural to you.
Being a part of a family farm, everyone's involved at some point. The food that we produce with our own hands, and we're proud of it. We want to make sure that we do it in the right way and that we can stay in business, so we want to make a profit, but we want our product to speak for us, and I think that's what we try to do. I think that's what most family farms try to do.
With such a strong, responsible agricultural base, the Garden by the Sea is likely to be one of Virginia's top farming regions for decades to come.
And there is really no more beautiful place, I don't think, than the shore, and it's one of my favorite places to visit. And there's nothing like getting fresh produce from a stand there while you're visiting. And David Hickman is the farmer that we profiled in the story, and he's joining us now live. And David, we have a question that came in, and the question is, people say that farmers contribute to pollution in the bay. Can you explain how grass buffer strips help protect the bay?
Well, a grass buffer strip is about a 40-foot wide area along the edge of the field or along a ditch that catches the runoff when we have heavy rains, then catches sediment, nutrients, any pesticides that happen to be in the water get caught up in that strip. But actually a better way is the no-till tillage practices that practically all the grain on the eastern shore are used now. No-till, plant into a live cover crop like the vetch we just saw on the video that produces about 80 pounds of organic nitrogen in its roots. So not only are we reducing the use of commercial fertilizers, but also holding the soil better and holding more moisture.
Yeah, that was really fascinating to watch you guys work through that vetch. And for me, you know, I see a lot of farms throughout the year, but that was really fascinating. And another question we had sent in to us through social media was, do you have trouble finding workers to harvest potatoes?
Well, Sherri, we're very fortunate. We have some school bus drivers and other people that have their summers off that work with us, and then we have a crew of about 60 people that come to us from Hastings, Florida, and they've been with us about 20 years. The family has. About half of the workers have been coming for the last 20 years, so we are very fortunate to have a good labor supply. That they are used to coming to us, and we look forward to them coming. When they leave Virginia, they go into Delaware, work potatoes, then they go back to North Florida where they begin setting out cabbage plants, and they set the cabbage out until they harvest the cabbage in the winter, then they're back into potatoes in Florida in April.
You know, and I think what's fascinating is to see how hard these folks work. I mean, truly, you're putting out a lot of pounds of potatoes there. About roughly how much?
We put out about 15 tractor-trailer loads a day, and our packing house runs from about 8 in the morning till around 11 o'clock at night. We have two shifts. One comes on at 4 o'clock, the others come in at 8 in the morning. Some people work the whole way through, but most of them are working part of the day.
Do we have any questions for the audience right now? I want to take some time to make sure. Any for David? All right, thank you very much. Now it's time for us to look around the State Fair and see where our Kathy Dixon is now. Kathy?
I'm here at Young McDonald's Farm, where visitors can see live animals and experience farm life at the State Fair of Virginia. Another way you can experience the bounty that Virginia farmers have to offer is to visit a farm stand and bring home fresh foods like sweet corn, beans, cantaloupe, and berries. Even on a rainy summer day, customers flocked to Miller Farms in Spotsylvania County. They came for fresh tomatoes, berries, and what some would call the best sweet corn around. And they came for the experience of buying right from the farmer.
Strawberries in May, sweet corn in the summer, tomatoes in the summer, pumpkins in the fall, blackberries in the summer. A lot of folks want to know why we don't have sweet corn in March, but we tell them you don't want sweet corn in March. You want sweet corn, in June and July and August when it's ready.
Ben Miller and his father Wayne have been in the fresh produce business since 2003, but this land has a long history in agriculture.
Mom and Daddy started farming in the mid-40s, and Daddy started the dairy farm in about 49. And then when I came out of college, it was just a natural succession just to come right on back to the farm.
But there may not have been a farm for the next generation of Millers had this generation not been able to adapt to changing market conditions. Finally, Wayne and Ben had to make the tough decision to sell their dairy herd and turn their focus to produce.
The dairy industry is changing, the economy is changing, and for us to remain in the dairy industry, we would have to have milked a lot more cows, gotten a lot larger. To remain in the dairy industry, we would have to have milked a lot more cows, gotten a lot larger, which meant we would have to do a lot of renovations, which would be extremely expensive. And we just felt maybe now was the time to change and go in a different direction.
The first year we bought a lot of produce just to see if folks would come out to the farm to support us. And then each year we've grown more and more produce. And the last 2 years we've bought very little produce, and most of it is grown right here on our farm.
The Millers work to produce a high-quality product for their customers. They also supply fresh produce to Washington, D.C. restaurants.
So they want to see the farmer and put a face with their produce. And you can't get any closer to it than, every day everything is fresh. We pick our corn every day, sometimes twice a day, depending on how fast it sells.
This third-generation farm family is also very environmentally conscious.
A lot of folks think that we're out there just spraying it every day just because they've read that somewhere or seen it somewhere. But it's expensive to do that, and we don't spray unless we have to. If we have to save a crop from bugs or fungus, then we'll do that.
We use nutrient management, and by doing that we take soil samples and we send them off. That way we know what nutrients we need to add to grow a crop. It's because we do not want to, at the price of ingredients, we do not want to spend more than we need to.
While summers are busy, the work doesn't end for the Miller farm when fall arrives. That's when pumpkin season begins, and they expect to have plenty to choose from before the calendar flips and the cycle begins again. Reporting in Spotsylvania County, I'm Kathy Dixon.
I'm going to tell you that is one of the nicest produce stands you can find here in the state in Spotsylvania County, and we really enjoyed visiting the Miller's farm, and they do have some of the tastiest sweet corn I think I've ever had in my life, and they are here with us on the front row. We put them in the hot seat, and thank you all for coming, and thank you for being part of this virtual tour. But we're going to put Jim on the hot seat. Does that sound good to you? All right. Jim, when people see a tractor with a 100-gallon tank in the field, they think it's full of insecticides or pesticides. Is that always true?
No, not necessarily at all. And in many cases, it could be liquid fertilizer, whether it's nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium, could be a micronutrient. And really, in the last few years, we're using less active ingredient pesticides per acre than ever before. So our farmers, and you saw it in the video earlier, are using only what's in a prescribed amount to do the job, whether it's an insecticide, a herbicide, a fungicide. And then, if it is liquid fertilizer, they're only using, as Wayne Miller said, that they're only using the amount that's in a prescribed manner there. Nutrient management plans are in place. The farmers are trained. They're certified pesticide applicators. So they're only using what's allowed by the label and what's needed by the crop.
This is kind of related, but not to produce. Are crops grown from GMO seeds harmful for people to eat?
No, and there's never been any research, any data that shows that across the United States or internationally.
And do we have any other questions here from the audience? I want to keep checking with you all. Come on, I know you've got something you're thinking about. One of the things, too, that I think is really important to note is that folks out there are doing exactly what the millers have done, and that's either diversifying or just changing what they do. Spencer, why are folks doing that? Why are we seeing them going from having a dairy or growing tobacco to growing sweet potatoes or produce?
Well, it's just, as the miller said, it's recognizing different market conditions. Farmers are finding new markets, niche markets, where maybe once they couldn't have actually made a living. The demographics, the consumer demands are changing, allowing farmers to get into a full-time vegetable business, whereas maybe 20 years ago that really wouldn't have worked. So it's just new markets opening up and different ways to market product.
And Jonah, with the dairy prices as we've seen them, is this causing a lot of people to get out of the dairy industry? I mean, you see a lot of numbers in your job.
Those who produce dairy have a little different situation in marketing, and that is that the milk, while it trades on a futures market, does not trade publicly the way many of the other commodities do. So it's difficult for the producer to manage their own risks many times themselves. Having said that, our per capita consumption of milk is in a sharp decline. When you look at the history of upbringing, we used to go outside and play and then come inside for, parents would call us inside for a glass of milk and a sandwich. Now our kids stay inside and play and go outside for lunch, and usually to get a big gulp or something like that. Our consumption of dairy has gone way down, and this is a trend that we're really seeing in the United States a lot more than we are in other countries around the world.
We've lost a lot of grade A dairies in Virginia. I think you're right, 650 grade A dairies today, where 25 years ago there were 1,600. And dairy farm, we've lost a lot of dairies.
Yeah, and you know, I find it funny that you say that about your kids, because I just can't keep a gallon of milk in my house. It's gone before it ever gets there, it seems like. Well, a lot of people do not realize that Virginia is one of the dominant poultry producing states in the nation. And let's go ahead and travel up Interstate 81 a bit and visit the Frenches. This family is from Shenandoah and is one of more than 1,000 farm families who produce poultry in our state. Whether it's eggs, broiler chickens, or turkeys, the poultry industry is crucial to the state's economic success.
There are more than 780 chicken and 280 turkey operations in Virginia. The Shenandoah Valley, where the modern poultry industry began, still has the greatest economic impact.
It's huge. They employ 700 or 800 people at this plant. There's probably 40, 50 poultry farmers in this county, maybe even a little bit more than that. So it's been a large part of our farming economy has come from poultry, and it was a great opportunity when this first started.
Virginia's poultry industry contributes nearly $1 billion to the state's economy. It's the largest farm commodity and Virginia's largest industry of agriculture.
There was a study that, it was a number of years ago, but it showed that for every job within the U.S. poultry processing industry, there were 7.2 jobs created outside of the industry. So there are numerous businesses that provide goods and services to the industry that depend on the poultry industry. The overall impact of this industry in Virginia is well over $1 billion.
The Fisher's operation is a fourth-generation farm in Shenandoah County in the heart of the valley. They have 4 poultry houses, raising more than 110,000 birds at any given time. It takes just over a month to raise a broiler chicken to weight before it's taken for processing. That's a lot of chicken, but the demand for poultry meat keeps growing. In 1992, chicken consumption surpassed beef in the United States.
I've been at this 32 years, so I've seen it go a long ways as far as restriction goes. I can't say that we ever raised anything unhealthy, but the demand on what we have in the field is just unreal compared to what it was 30 years ago.
We need the modern commercial poultry production in order to satisfy the nutritional needs of the vast majority of the people. So it's great to talk about local food production, But we're also blessed with a food distribution system that allows Virginians to enjoy a lot of different agricultural products that are not available in Virginia, but they can be brought into Virginia through this distribution system.
But while Virginia's poultry industry is a well-established and dominant industry, farmers are concerned that foreign poultry supplies could take away market share in the future. Fisher says Americans need to support local producers first.
We're really hoping that poultry stays in the United States. I can't stay in this county, but in the United States, because I, as an American, don't think I want to eat a product that is not regulated like we know that happens in South America. So I feel it needs to stay here at home.
The good news is that demand for Virginia poultry exports continues to grow. Currently, Virginia farmers raise about 18% of chicken and about 10% of turkey that will be exported overseas. The largest foreign buyers for Virginia poultry are Mexico, Russia, and Hong Kong. With such a strong market share, the future of Virginia's poultry industry and farmers looks bright.
Now, the Valley really is one of the most beautiful areas agricultural that you can find out there, and it is an area that is full of very proud people of their agricultural heritage, and especially of the poultry industry. And Spencer, we did get this question earlier on from an email from one of our friends, and it says, do poultry farmers give their chickens hormones to artificially boost their growth?
With the poultry, in the poultry industry, not really. No, they don't use hormones for broiler production. They've been able to achieve rapid growth rates through just genetics and nutrition, and it's not really something that's used in the poultry industry. So no, it's not prevalent by any means.
And this is something else that we hear a lot about. We hear a whole lot about range-free chickens and free-range chickens. What does that mean, and what is the difference between the poultry houses that we see through the valley and those that are free range?
Well, obviously, when you look at pork and poultry production in this country, a lot of it's done in confinement, and there are reasons for that. It's to protect those animals from the elements, to help them keep them healthy and in large groups, very efficient to feed a large number of people. Now, we're seeing a resurgence in outdoor hog production, range-free chickens, and that's an exciting development because it's an alternative that a lot of people can do. They found niche markets. We work a lot with those people day in and day out, as we do with the confinement people. So, they're just different production methods. Nutritionally, whether there's a difference, that a lot of that's anecdotal, probably in the texture of the meat and that type of thing. But we can all go into certain stores and find range-free chickens or restaurants. So consumers are driving some of that, but we still have 300 million people to feed every day, and we still we have to have this balance between a fairly large, efficient agricultural production system, but with huge opportunities for increased localized and regionalized food systems. I think it's an exciting time.
It is an exciting time, and like you said, there's markets for everything out there. And one of the things that I found really interesting is when we went to visit this poultry operation is the quality of care that these birds get. They're checked on several times during the day. It's kept climate controlled. I mean, honestly, they're a little bit more comfortable than we are right now. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into keeping a poultry operation climate controlled, right?
Yeah, it is, and I mean, it's just farmers make their livelihood through their animals and their crops, and they're going to do the best they can and take care of those animals.
And we have a question from our audience member. Please say your name and where you're from and your question.
This is Pam Holloway, and I'm from Spotsylvania. I have a question for you. What happens when you lose electricity with those types of situations? Because I know, like, we had the huge storm that came through just a couple months ago. How do you handle those types of situations given the fact that you've got such a confined facility?
That is an issue. I mean, some people have generators. Again, a lot of those storms, they're catastrophic not only to farm animals, but to homes, to businesses. And it's something that's unfortunate to have to deal with. But it's something that does occur, and the consequences sometimes, as we know, are not good. Going to fully electrifying those systems with generators is a huge cost, as we know, but it's something that is a concern, and you know, how you resolve that is something that's on everyone's mind. That's a good question, good point.
And there were birds that were lost as a result of the storm. This last big electric outage in the region, and it was, you know, due to electric out for 5 or 6 days.
Well, even in the livestock industry, power outages are a problem with us. With a lot of the NRCS programs and the best management practices we utilize today, taking animals away from live bodies of water puts us over onto a well source, which requires electricity. So this derecho that we encountered at the end of June was a learning curve for us, even, you know, with hundreds of head of cattle without water, and what you have to do, move very quickly, utilizing local fire departments to haul water in, anything we could do, and it was a great learning curve. We are in the process of buying generators.
Right.
I mean, I think just one more thing with the electricity, and as we know, most farmers are sort of on the end of the line. And when you have 1 million people in D.C. yelling for electricity, like we as an organization and talk among farmers, how do we get those electric companies to, you know, go out to those areas where those animals need immediate attention, make that a precedent with 1 million people yelling in their ears? You know, that's...
And you know, one of the things too that I think is interesting is supply and demand, which is very simple. And Jonah, you know, we're seeing a price increase with food in general, but with so many people wanting lean protein, are we expecting to see a price increase with chicken, with poultry, turkey?
Well, we're going to continue our consumptive habits. I would say this, as far as lean meats are concerned, we already import a lot of our lean beef. As a matter of fact, it might be surprising to everyone to know that the United States imports more beef poundage-wise than we export. As far as dollar amount, we export the higher quality of meats, and the dollar amount is greater. But we're already very comfortable as a consuming nation importing our needs from other countries where we can get it less expensive.
And I think we had a question from our audience. If we can grab that real quick.
Sherri, real quick, just you mentioned lean protein of being poultry. Beef has 26 cuts that are leaner than poultry.
How's that commercial go?
Eat beef.
Dun. It's what's for dinner. We have a question from our audience member.
Thank you. My name is Gary. Originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, but I live in Henrico County. So back to your comments about supply and demand. If the U.S. did not import produce or other products, would we be able to sustain our own demand? And are there any concerns about our ability to meet our demands?
Great question. Who wants to take that?
I mean, I think we could, and you know, it takes a lot of study if we stopped exporting. I mean, it's a balance. And again, like Jonah said, we export high volume, higher cost products sometimes, and then products like grains that other countries can't grow. But Jonah probably follows those markets a little bit more than me.
We have the ability to feed ourselves. There's absolutely no question of that. We also do feed the world. We're the largest exporter of food items in the world. So, and sometimes we export and we import based on supply demand. Sometimes we do so based on trade agreements, and which comes in and clouds up the whole supply demand scenario. But have no fear that we can satisfy our own domestic needs, but we're probably not going to restrict ourselves to doing that for a number of reasons.
That was a really great question, but we're going to move on now. We're going to find out exactly where our Kathy Dixon is here at Meadow Event Park. Kathy?
I'm here at Porky's Barbecue Place on the Midway. You know, Virginians are proud of their agricultural heritage, and pork products are included in that. It's interesting how many different pork products are available today, and production methods of pork have changed and improved as well.
Bobby Bryan has been a hog producer since 1953. He's seen a lot of good changes in farming methods and how hogs are raised in those 59 years.
You know, I saw many a time sows faring out in the woods and buzzards come in and get the pigs or pick them up with the tails and that kind of thing. And then, when they're out outside. They've got to contend with the elements, whether it be heat, whether it be snow, sleet, rain, whatever. They're well cared for.
The biggest change in hog production in those years has been a switch to confined hog houses and contract operations. The houses offer climate-controlled conditions for the hogs, and contract farming for the Murphy Brown Company offers improved profit opportunities for Bryan and his family.
We're more involved in taking care of the animals than we are worrying about whether or not we're going to have feed or what the feed's going to cost us and all these other decisions. They make for us rather than us have to make ourselves.
Bryan farms with his grandson Caleb, who takes care of both the hogs and the environmental standards they have to meet. Both federal and state government agencies have strict rules for how they store and apply their waste products.
We take soil samples and manure samples every year. They formulate how much manure needs to be applied to the ground for the conditions of the ground. So it's kind of an art involved in it. It's not like it used to be where you put down what you wanted to when you wanted to.
Like many hog producers, the Bryans not only meet these standards, they exceed them. They've won awards for their environmental stewardship.
We've actually fenced out all the creeks, all the streams. We fenced out our clean water pond. We have boundaries and buffer zones that we have to go by while applying, so there's no chance of manure getting into runoff into the creeks, streams, or the pond.
One of the other changes hog producers have made over the years is improved veterinary care for their animals. Bryan says drugs are carefully prescribed and used only as needed. Hogs are not processed until they are tested healthy and free of any medicines.
We use very little. If a pig happens to get under the weather for one reason or other, maybe a joint problem or something, we'll pull it out and treat it and identify it and put down the date we gave the medication and so on. In rare occasions, we might have to medicate through the water into our house, but that's very rare.
Some hog farmers are phasing out the use of gestation crates for mother pigs and their piglets in favor of open pens. Bryan says they don't raise young pigs, so that doesn't affect his operation, but there are pros and cons to both systems.
In an open pen system, they are free to roam around within that particular pen, and you know, sometimes you've got boss sows and they'll go up and nip the sow on the back and these kind of things, and you know, it may not be as glamorous for the pig as people may think it is.
Whatever production methods are used, Bobby and Caleb say the comfort of their animals is top priority. They are constantly monitoring the temperature and food supplies in their hog houses, but it's also a rewarding occupation, one where they're always improving their operation.
We both enjoy working on the farm. I graduated high school. That was the first thing I wanted to do, was come back to the farm. Been here ever since. Actually, before the high school days, I was here. It's just a pleasure to get up every morning and come out and be here on the family farm and working with my grandfather.
We don't do anything the way we did 50 years ago, and I don't know why people expect farmers to continue on farm like they did 50 and 60 years ago. You know, we have cell phones, we have internet, we have medical procedures that wasn't available 50 years ago, but I don't know how we're going to continue to feed the world if we farm like we did 50 and 60 years ago.
With dedicated family farmers like the Bryans, hog farming will continue to improve in the years to come. In Buckingham County, Virginia, I'm Kathy Dixon.
That was a great story, Kathy, and of course this is one about a family, like so many farm families here in Virginia, and there have been so many positive changes to the care of livestock in general, not just hogs. But we do have an audience question here, and again.
This is Pam Holloway from Spotsylvania. I had a question regarding our exports. I've been reading and doing a lot of research lately and have seen where in the European countries, and now just recently even in Russia, they're refusing to accept our corn because it is genetically modified. How is that going to affect our markets in the future if other countries around the world are banning genetically modified products and we have a large portion of it here in the United States?
There's some things we do not have control over. The importation by a country is one of those, and if they set standards that whether we consider them to be rational or not, it's up to us to satisfy those requirements, or we have to forsake that country or that market as an export. We have to change our practices and produce what it is that our customer desires, whether it's domestic or whether it's international.
I think if there's a market for non-GMO products, then
the American farmer will produce it, but at the present time, the large majority of corn and soybeans are genetically modified just because the yields are so much higher. You need to use less pesticides on genetically modified. Well, I've been using genetically modified soybeans since they came on the market, and we're getting better yields every year from them. Same way with the BT corn and the other traits that are stacked into the seed corn.
With far, far fewer inputs.
Exactly. Fewer inputs. It's far safer. We're not having to use the pesticides. We have far fewer herbicides that we need to use. So the GMO products are better for the people, better for the environment.
One of the other questions that we received online is about the use of manure, which is stored in a lagoon. Where does that go and what is it used for? Jim, I think we talked about that a little bit earlier.
You know, many years ago we found out that manure is not a waste product, it's a resource, and it's density, it's nutrient dense, and so we use it on land, we apply it to land, whether it's poultry litter, whether it's beef manure, whether it's dairy manure. It's used and it's put down as a nutrient management plan will allow, and all of our larger livestock producers, poultry producers have to have nutrient management plans. So it's pulled out of that lagoon, it's put into a tank, or it put into a manure spreader and applied, but in a prescribed amount again, based on soil tests, based on a test of that manure. That manure is tested, it's used on what that crop will produce and how much it'll pull out of that land, how much of the nutrient value it'll pull out of that land. So it's very scientific, it's used with good management, with nutrient management plans.
And you know, Jim, there's no more organic source of nutrients than manure.
Well, that's exactly right, David. I mean, manure is, we talk a lot about organic. Manure, all of it, it's organic. You know, our organic material is what it is. And many of our farmers use it. It's excellent fertilizer. It's excellent nutrients. So, yep.
And you know what they say, it happens. We have a question from our audience here now. Go ahead, state your name and where you're from and your question.
My name is Errol. I'm from Richmond. As you can see, you won't mistake me for a farmer. So my question is, getting back to some of the comments you were making about like trying to get the electricity back on during the blackouts, and back in the day I remember in North Carolina getting farming news. Why don't we see or hear more farming news in the general media, except when there's a disaster or a drought? That's when we hear it. How come we don't hear more just general farming news about yields, crops, developments, etc.? Thank you.
I think part of that is there's far fewer farms today. Used to be, the farm size was maybe 100 acres or so. So, you know, a county had several hundred farmers. Today, the average farm size in my area of the country is 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acres. So there's only fewer people that are interested in that type of news. My children went to public schools, and they were one of the few kids in their classes that knew anything about agriculture. So it's just larger, fewer farms. I think, and, you know, radio station TV, they're looking for an audience that's going to have advertisers. So.
Agriculture is not the most important industry. It's the only important industry. Without it, there's nothing else. Having said that, 1.5% of our population is in production agriculture, which makes it difficult when we think that the other 98.5% vote their desires quite often without regard for agriculture. And certainly in the news, if there's news going on, 1.5% of the population might not contribute as much to a news media.
But you can always catch Real Virginia once a month on many stations across the state and also nationwide on RFD TV. We're very honored as the Virginia Farm Bureau to be able to bring these farmer stories, just like what you saw. Those stories were actually already shown on our television program, Real Virginia, because we believe in telling their message and spreading the word about the importance of agriculture. And Joan is absolutely right. It is the industry. In fact, it is the largest industry in the state of Virginia. So it's critically important that all the folks out there that are watching this show support our Virginia farmers, support Virginia agriculture, and really embrace local.
$55 billion a year. Industry.
Yeah, I wish I had that kind of a business all the time. I mean, it's hard work. And one of the things that we've learned by covering agriculture with our television program all these years is that it is extremely hard work. These people, blood, sweat, and tears, literally. But I've never met a finer person. I have never met people in an industry that cared so much about what they're doing and cared about their animals and cared about their crops, their fields, the environment. These farmers are truly environmental stewards of the land, and I'm honored to be able to bring you their stories. And we're honored here to bring this virtual farm tour to you tonight, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And we also appreciate you joining us today to discuss and bring forward some of these questions that we received. It means a lot to us to be able to hear from you, the public, and in fact, be able to get the answers from the folks who produce the food that we enjoy. Now, and it's been my pleasure to host all of you, and I know all of these folks are extremely busy and took some time out of their jobs and from the farm where you don't get a vacation. But remember, folks, you can always send us your questions at realvirginia@vafb.com. That's realvirginia@vafb.com. We're going to be happy to answer any of those questions that you have as quickly as possible. So for Kathy, our esteemed panel, the Virginia Farm Bureau, and the State Fair of Virginia, thanks for joining us, and have a good night.